Canada's cities are among the people that are the most hurt by socialist policies, and certainly those are the type of policies that we see from Justin Trudeau. I'm joined today by Pierre Poilievre. Pierre, you're awesome. You fight so hard for people in Canada as our Shadow Minister for Finance. You've been leading the charge against Justin Trudeau's job-killing carbon tax. But you just brought up something very interesting with me. Canada's Conservatives, I mean, the last election certainly, we weren't successful in downtown urban centers. How do you think we could change that? And why do you think it's important for people who live in those areas to vote Conservative?
Well, you're right. Conservative parties all around the world, Michelle, have not been particularly successful in the most densely populated urban settings. And I think that's because the modern socialist left has been able to distract from the real issues at stake for the people living in those settings by focusing on style and culture. So you look at Justin Trudeau and you think he looks like a cool, urban, funky guy. And so culturally, he manages to reach people who really have nothing in common with Trudeau's socialist ideology. So let me give you some examples. You imagine the barista or the coffee shop owner in Vancouver or Montreal. This is a risk taker, put his or her own capital on the line, probably mortgaged their house in order to open their coffee shop. Sure. They're in a fiercely competitive marketplace, lots of coffee shops. Yeah. They have to keep costs down, be incredibly efficient, inventive. They're they face the harm of massive regulation, high taxes, and other government obstructionism. And yet, we as Conservatives have failed to reach over to those people. And I think we need to change the way we communicate, because ours is a message of openness, of freedom, and of voluntary exchange. It's not our image, but is our message. So
explain more about that.
We believe in free enterprise. The only difference between free enterprise and socialism, there is only one difference. It's not between one favors business and the other favors workers, or one is individualistic and one is collectivistic even. Okay. It is between mandatory and voluntary. It is between free choice and force. The free enterprise is based on a system where buyers and sellers exchange goods voluntarily without the forceful hand of government. And in that system, the inner cities thrive. You think of the sharing economy, where you have these dead assets, empty air, people's empty apartments, cars, completely useless until they are filled with temporary tenants connected by Airbnb or other services. The same goes for Uber, where someone's car might otherwise be unused and therefore essentially useless as an asset for 80% of the day, but the sharing economy unleashes that asset because you have the voluntary exchange of driving services for payment, which lowers the cost of transportation and gives job opportunities to people who would not otherwise have the chance to earn more money. But we see other examples, especially harming where socialism, inner city socialism and big government, harms the poorest and most disadvantaged people. Municipalities bring in these zoning rules which prevent construction of affordable housing in good, opportunity-filled neighborhoods. And that makes it impossible for poor people to live where the jobs are. And there's a lot of research to show that this kind of interventionist, either provincial or municipal involvement in blocking construction actually keeps poor people away from the opportunities that would springboard them into prosperity.
You brought this up when you and I were questioning, I think the name is Adam Vaughan, right?
That's right.
He serves as one of Trudeau's sort of under ministers for housing.
Yes.
And we were questioning him.
Example.
He was saying,
housing crisis. There's a housing crisis.
It's Harper's fault. We've got all this money that we're going to put in affordable housing. Of course, they haven't really built anything, but you made a very good point on this to him.
So Adam Vaughan is a hard left socialist member of the Trudeau team in Parliament. And he says there's a housing crisis in Canada. And you know what? He's absolutely right. And if he wants to know the cause, he should take a look in the mirror. He is a former city councillor from the city of Toronto, where a study just released showed that the average cost of a unit of housing is increased by over $160,000 a year because of government rules, fees, taxes, and zoning restrictions. And he, as a city councillor, imposed those restrictions. Now, $160,000 means the difference between a poor family having the opportunity to own a modest home and not, between the ability for a young person to move where there are excellent job opportunities or stay in a community where there are no jobs. So it effectively is like building a big wall around our most opportunity-filled communities and making the poor pay for that wall. And it's very advantageous to the rich, by the way, because those who have mansions see their property values go up when the city prevents the new supply of housing to come on.
That's right.
But this is an example of where government intervention pushes the poorest people down and lifts the richest people up, and that is exactly the opposite of what we should be doing. We should open up the economy, allow the market to provide more housing so that our underdogs, through their own hard work and enterprise, can go and get great jobs in our urban setting.
Can I give you another example? You saw this when you were a minister in employment services in our last government. We saw one of Canada's labour programs, which has been really heavily used by the Liberals and increased in areas of high unemployment, the temporary foreign worker program, where we saw businesses in urban settings where there was a supply of labor getting basically 100% of their labor force from this program. So bringing in workers from other countries on a temporary basis. And we actually saw that distort wages, right? Because if you're bringing in a labor supply that's not part of the population, you're actually depressing wage growth in that area over time, right? So again, this is kind of, we had put in place a moratorium and a review on that program. When the Liberals came into power, they not only stopped that, they added TFW spots in areas of high unemployment. And how does that allow the market to either fix labor conditions, working conditions, or wages?
No, that's right.
So I guess, you and I are sitting here having a very in-depth policy conversation, and I think we started off the video by saying, how do we translate this? And
we need to talk about the potential for free enterprise to lift the poorest people out of poverty, give more opportunity to our young people, create these enterprise zones in our city where people thrive through their own hard work and through meritocracy rather than aristocracy. I think of immigrants who come to this country with professional qualifications. They might be doctors or architects, but they're stuck earning minimum wage because these regulatory bodies that control occupations are preventing them from getting a license to practice. And we were in government, we tried to push these organizations to give faster recognition of foreign credentials. And groups like in Calgary, the Immigrant Access Fund, took private capital, gave study loans, microloans to immigrants with high qualifications but low-paying jobs, and they were able to take 2-3 months, get their license to practice, and see their income rise by like 600% in 6 months, and they pay more tax and contribute more.
Exactly.
But that's an example of how we need to knock down some of the barriers that government puts in the way. So often, socialists have been able to convince conscientious inner city people that government is the solution to the problems of social justice, when in fact government is the one that created the problem in the first place. And government so often under socialist regimes is like the doctor who poisons the patient and then administers an antidote. And then the patient says, I'm still alive. Could you explain to me why you poisoned me in the first place? And the doctor says, well, so I could save your life. I'm a doctor. That's what I do.
Yeah.
And then make people think that you owe the government your life. Well, in fact, the government doesn't own your life. The government did not save your life. You are an autonomous person, and we need to give people their freedom back so that they can rise up based on their own God-given talents.
Now, something that strikes me is that there's a lot of people in Canada who actually don't even question what the role of government is. And I'm not saying this from a, sort of a pejorative way. It's just that government has become so ubiquitous, right? I think Canada has moved more and more and more towards this socialist state because that is what the left pushes, right? They want more state control. They want the normalization of government. To your point, the government will take care of it. it's not society's responsibility, it's not the individual's responsibility, don't worry, government's got this. But then, to your point, it actually has the unintended consequences of stifling growth, stifling opportunity. Now, I think in terms of Justin Trudeau, there's some concrete examples of that sort of esoteric concept, right? There's the small business tax increase, right? Which essentially, I mean, it would have created a huge bureaucracy. I'm not sure it would have actually brought any more government revenue in. But then when you look at the detrimental impact that it would have on shrinking growth and taking away that ability for people to take risk and invest in business, it actually has the opposite effect. Are there other things that you think, you've done such a good job opposing that sort of really under Justin Trudeau highlight this point that we can start saying, look, cities, this is really bad for you?
Well, look at the Billy Bishop Island Airport in downtown Toronto. Little island where airplanes can land and take business travelers to the business district. Well, Porter Airlines wanted to use private money to extend the runway so they could land more planes. Now, they would have purchased more planes, ironically, from Bombardier.
Oh.
The government stepped in because some wealthy waterfront condo owners were upset that they were going to hear more airplanes, even though they're living next to an airport. And so Trudeau, one of his first acts was to block that privately funded infrastructure project, which would have not only created construction jobs and brought more business travelers to downtown Toronto, which is good for our financial capital of Ontario, it would also have reduced traffic between Pearson Airport and downtown Toronto. It would have, by extension, reduced pollution. And now they say, we need to bail out Bombardier with public money.
Dollars.
So instead of letting a private purchase of $2 billion worth of Bombardier planes, they cancel that purchase by blocking the runway extension. Then they bail out Bombardier. Then they say, we need more transportation. There's too much congestion between Pearson and downtown. We'll have to spend more money on that. And then they say, we need to stop global warming. We're going to bring in a carbon tax in order to do it. Instead of allowing a project that was completely green, it would have taken cars off the road and congestion off of our streets and, of course, pollution out of our sky. So they cause a problem through their interventions, and then they step forward with their taxes, their spending and regulation, and call themselves the solution.
So poison and antidote. So what are some of your antidotes, permanent antidotes, Pierre?
Well, I mean, the first is not to administer the poison in the first place. I think we need to open up our economy, remove unnecessary restrictions on the flow of people, goods, and services. We need to lower the overall tax burden so that people can climb the economic ladder with a lighter burden on their shoulders. And we need an economy that is driven by merit, a merit-driven economy. Whenever the wealth of the nation is concentrated in the government, then those who have the most political power are able to monopolize that wealth.
Yes.
Those who can purchase access to the vaults of the state can then make themselves wealthier. In the United States of America, a company called Strategas did a study on the correlation between the amount of money businesses spend on lobbying and the size of the government in Washington.
Oh, that's
and there's almost a
interesting.
perfect correlation. The bigger is the government, the more business spends on lobbying. And why wouldn't they, right? That's where, if the return on investment comes from acquiring political power, that's what businesses will do.
Or if monopolies are created by regulation or et cetera, right?
Exactly. And so when the government gets big, businesses invest in having more control over the government so that they can get their hands on that money. But the question is, Michelle, what kind of economy do we want? Do we want an economy where businesses are obsessed with pleasing consumers or with pleasing politicians? Do we want an economy where you get ahead by having the best lobbyist or by having the best product? The free market requires you have the best product and to be obsessed with consumers. And that's what we as conservatives want to instill. A free enterprise that puts consumers first and functions on meritocracy, not aristocracy.
Interestingly enough, I think that our contemporaries, you and I aren't as young as we used to be, but people that are coming up behind us are actually, that generation is a generation of risk takers, independents. Like there's a lot of independence within the younger cohort of the millennial generation, Gen Z. And my hope is that, I had a conversation with a a friend of mine, his daughter, she's 19, and she just got a new job, so she got a raise. And she came to me and she was furious because she goes, I'm making more money, but I bumped up into the next tax bracket, so I'm actually taking home less than I did before. And it was because she had started her own nutrition consulting business, and she'd gotten some more money. And she's like, how can you stop this? How can we, stop that intrusion on my paycheck? Or I don't want to take this risk. I do think that if Conservatives can show that sort of principle that you just said, that we can start winning cities again.
I think so. I think we've got to connect with people by explaining to them that we're the party of opportunity and openness and free markets, and that's a message we're going to have to take to our inner cities, to newcomers, and to the people who we've had a hard time reaching in the past. But I'm confident we can do it.
Me too. That's some of the things that we talked about here in Halifax this weekend. How can we structure our policies, Canada's Conservative policies, to ensure that we're helping everybody across the country, including those living in downtown, big urban centers like we're at right now in Halifax. Working hard for you in Halifax. Have a great day.